The ice did not merely shift. It screamed, a deep, ancient groan rising from the glacier's bones, as if the planet itself sensed what was coming. "Hold formation," Tracon ordered, his voice cutting to the rising wind with calm precision. Spacing maintained. "Augur, starboard edge, watch your footing." Corporal Nolan Riley grit his teeth, the frost in his beard cracking as he glanced back along their line. Augur, a mountain of white fur and muscle, planted each heavy paw with deliberate weight, finding purchase where Nolan's crampon struggled. Ahead, Chan, another Krytian like Tracon, moved with eerie grace. His long, jointed limbs bent at angles that defied human anatomy, distributing his weight across 4 perfect balance points. His dark oaken plates shed snow in thin sheets with every motion. Just behind him, Cherim, their avian pilot, took precise, bird-like steps. Her talons clicked on the ice, feathers rippling in iridescent bands of green and blue as she scanned both the sky and the frozen horizon. They moved as one, a human engineer, 2 Krytians, 1 Ugrin, 1 avian navigator. For species, 1 unit. Task Force Kilo. The ice bridge under them arched over a chasm, so deep the blue haze at its bottom looked like another world swallowing the light. Day 2 on Kryos, officially a variable environment training world, unofficially a frozen death trap designed by a bureaucrat who hates life. Nolan had other, less printable names for it. Chan lifted his 4-fingered hand, pointing toward the jagged black peaks stabbing upward to the bruised sky. "That is the spine," he said. "The direct ascent is prohibited. We follow the sanctioned perimeter route to the west." Nolan huffed a plume of white steam. "You think a little climb is going to stop us?" Cherim trilled, a dry, staccato sound that passed for laughter among her kind. "The threat index is statistically indefensible," she replied. "This surface, your mass, localized gravity fluctuations, catastrophic outcomes dominate all projections. Poor odds. My mass," Nolan shot back, "is 100% corn-fed heroism. That's the variable your little charts forgot." Cherim's feathers flattened in exasperation. "My calculations account for terminal velocity," she said crisply. "Heroism impacts ice at the same speed as cowardice." Even Augur rumbled with amusement, a low thunder like distant glaciers calving. The banter warmed them more than their heated suits. Months of shared misery had fused them into a unit. They were near graduation, one last trial between them and operational deployment. Then the world moved. A vibration crawled up through Nolan's boots into his bones. The ice bridge moaned again, a long, resonant note of warning. "Tremor." Tracon barked. "Brace." Nolan dug his heels in, taking tension on the safety line anchored behind them. Cracks spider across the bridge like lightning frozen in the surface. Then the ice beneath Nolan vanished. He plummeted. The safety line caught with brutal force, slamming him sideways into the cliff face hard enough to rattle his teeth and snap his jaw shut. His world flashed white. Then came the sound. A wet, sharp, nauseating crack. Not the ice. His leg. Agony detonated through him, white-hot and absolute. He hung spinning in the cold void, breath tearing from his lungs. "Nolan!" Augur roared, voice booming over the storm. Chan and Augur hauled on the rope. Each yank sent fresh, blinding waves of pain through Nolan's shattered limb. They dragged him over the edge. He collapsed on the ice, his leg twisted at a grotesque angle. Bone gleamed through torn muscle and blood-soaked fabric. "Compound fracture," Chan said calmly. "Tibia fully breached. Possible fibula involvement." Nolan gave a raw, breathless laugh. "Oh, yeah." Fibula didn't want to miss the party. A shrill alarm cut through the wind. Cherim's wrist column flashed red, her feathers flattening in fear. "Squad leader, severe atmospheric event. Flash blizzard. Category 5. Genesis point directly above us. Impact window, minutes." Tracon looked from the data to Nolan's exposed bone, then to the horizon where a vortex of dark red storm bands boiled. A training mission became a survival scenario in a single heartbeat. Nolan fumbled his medkit open with shaking hands. "It's bad," he said. "Leg collapses under my own weight. Useless." On Kryos, a Category 5 blizzard wasn't weather, it was execution. Their only shelter was a cave networked 12 kilometers away. A 4-hour march in good weather. They had 10 minutes before the storm hit. "We build a sled," Augur growled, already pulling out high-tensile wire. "Unacceptable," Cherim snapped. "Drag coefficient, slope grade, added mass, maximum distance before wideout. 2 kilometers. All 4 die." "He comes with us," Augur snarled, his cluster eyes fixed on Tracon. Chan spoke quietly. "The Kyrat, the unit, returns whole." "The atmosphere does not care about sacred bonds." Cherim shot back. "This is triage." The wind screamed. Ceramic-hard pellets of ice struck their armor. Static filled their comms. Tracon knelt beside Nolan. His voice was steady. His eyes were not. "Nolan," he said, "we will mark your position with a beacon. After the storm, we return with transport." They all knew the truth. By then, he would be a frozen statue. In silence, they left him their spare heat packs, med-gel, rations, emergency supplies. Augur knelt last, wrapping his personal thermal cloak around Nolan's shoulders, an Ugran item so valued it was practically sacred. Cherim placed her own grav-assist disc beside him, a tiny device that couldn't lift him, but could reduce mass. Tracon raised a hand in a perfect Krytian salute. "Corporal." Nolan forced a brittle smile. "Better run, sir. Wouldn't want you missing your ride." Tracon held the salute 1 heartbeat longer. Then he turned, and the storm swallowed the squad in 3 steps. Nolan was alone. His leg throbbed with relentless pain. Wind howled like something hungry. It would be easy, so easy, to lie back and let the cold take him. Then a spark flared inside him. Hot, bitter, human, spite. "They made the right call," he muttered through clenched teeth. "Now I make it the right outcome." He scanned the storm-blurred world. Before falling, he'd seen a shallow overhang 20 meters away. "Shelter," he whispered. "First rule, shelter." He began to crawl, dragging himself through agony, leaving a red smear in the fresh snow. He carved blocks from a drift with his multi-tools ultrasonic blade, stacked them, built a crude snow wall, sealed himself inside a shaky little igloo just as the blizzard arrived like a monster roaring down from the sky. Inside, he cracked heat packs and pressed them to his chest. Then he tended to the wound. He cut his trouser leg open, revealing a horror of shredded flesh and gleaming bone. "Okay," he gasped. "Let's make this worse before it gets better." He cinched a tourniquet high above the break, and to his vision pulsed with black static, poured antiseptic over the wound, a burning flood that made him bite down on his glove to keep from screaming, smeared med-gel over the exposed bone, injected painkillers and antibiotics. The pain withdrew just enough for thought. Inventory. Plan. Survive. He stared at his pulse rifle. Strong enough. Long enough. Sturdy enough. He sighed. "Sorry, girl, but you're about to become medical equipment." He stripped the rifle apart, using the barrel casing and stock as splint pieces. Then came the worst part. He braced himself, grabbed his ankle and knee. 3, 2, he pulled. The world turned white and silent. When he came back, the bone was at least pointing inward again. He taped the makeshift splint tight, sweat freezing on his skin. Then he rested, ate, drank melted snow. After an hour, he crawled out of the igloo. The extraction point was 60 kilometers away. Nolan Riley began to crawl. Pull, plant, drag, push, repeat. Every meter of victory, every 100 a miracle, every breath of defiance. For Tracon and the others, the march became penance. Not the ritual kind, the bone-deep kind, the kind that broke silently inside a commander who had violated a sacred truth of his people. The Kyrat never leaves one behind. Chan's long legs scissored through the deepening snow with cold precision, each step measured, each movement efficient. Cherim walked just behind him, her scanner angled downward, talons tapping warnings of hidden drifts and unstable shelves. Augur brought up the rear, a massive, dark shape hunched against the shrieking wind, his fur frozen into hard white plates. Gone was the banner. Gone was the familiar camaraderie that had carried them through months of training. Only the wind remained, and Treekin's guilt. They stopped beneath a jagged rock outcrop as a vicious gust swept overhead, snow whipping past like shrapnel. Cherim moved toward Tracon, feathers pressed tight against her skull. It was the only logical option, she said quietly. Survival probability with him was less than 1%. Without him, 38%. The model is clear. Tracon looked out across the endless white. Numbers carry weight, Cherim, he said. But guilt is not governed by numbers. Guilt is an unproductive state, she replied. It provides no tactical reinforcement. Its purpose, Tracon whispered, is to remind us what our decisions cost. Behind them, Alger's heavy steps slowed. The Ugrin's shoulder sagged. His silence, usually powerful, grounding, had taken on a new, hollow quality. Every few minutes, he looked back over his shoulder as if expecting Nolan to appear, crawling stubbornly out of the storm. But the storm behind them was a white void, and Nolan Riley was a point swallowed by it. Chan's signal to halt was over, and they marched on, the second betrayal of the ice. Hours later, they reached a stretch of smooth, wind-swept ice. The terrain felt wrong beneath their boots, too polished, too perfect. Cherim's feathers twitched. Subsurface anomalies, she chirped, adjusting her scanner. Caution. A split second later, the ice groaned a long fractured moan, and the world tore open. The glacier split in a seam. A new chasm yawned beneath them, deep and black. Chan reacted first, his limbs flexing as he leapt backward. Cherim darted sideways with rapid-fire steps. Alger braced himself against a ledge as the ice dropped out below. When the ground stopped moving, a vast canyon had cleaved the glacier in two. Tracon stepped to the edge, staring into the abyss. This was not on the map, Cherim said. It wasn't here during last year's exercises, Alger rumbled. Chan traced the fracture lines with his gaze. The tremor that broke Riley's leg opened this chasm. The planet is shifting. Tracon lowered his head. If Nolan had somehow survived the blizzard, if he had somehow crawled this far, this chasm would have swallowed him instantly. Hope, thin, fragile, stupid hope, died quietly inside him. The guilt hardened into something heavier. A duty, route around. Alger asked. No. Cherim already had her survey kit out. Time is finite. We go over. Tracon joined her, without question. Together, the two Krytians worked in practiced silence. Cherim calculating wind shear, trajectory, and strike depth. Tracon prepping the grappling launcher and verifying anchor angles. He fired. The rocket grapple screamed across the chasm, trailing a cable. A downdraft nearly pulled it short, but it slammed into far ice wall, claws deploying and biting deep. Tracon tested the line. It held. I crossed first, Alger said. His mass made the line safer for the others. He clipped in and began pulling himself across, hand over hand, his massive frame dangling over the abyss. Wind clawed at him, snow plastering his fur. But he moved like a continent, unstoppable. Cherim followed, then Chan. Tracon went last. Halfway across, he looked down into the void, and behind him, and forward. He saw Nolan's face, pale, determined, boots slipping, jaw clenched, and something inside Tracon twisted painfully. A sled would have killed all four of us, he thought. I condemned one to save three. When he hauled himself onto the far ledge, relief never came, only a deeper exhaustion. They marched on. Meanwhile, Nolan versus the world. Nolan crawled. He crawled through pain until pain became background noise. He crawled through cold until cold became part of him. He crawled until time blurred into a loop of white breath and red snow and raw, grinding agony. When he felt himself fading, he whispered lines from old movies. Come with me if you want to live. Or, yippee-ki, or sometimes. What's the worst that could happen? It kept him sane. He planned a dramatic speech for when he rejoined his squad. He rehearsed every possible sarcastic "you left me?" entrance line. Mostly discarded. One stayed. Took you long enough. He saved that one. When his vision dimmed, he ran engineering calculations. When despair crept in, he redesigned imaginary fuel injectors. When hallucinations nipped at the edges of his mind, he recited childhood movies verbatim. Survival with a rhythm. Pull, plant, drag, push. He didn't know how long he crawled until the sky darkened into the bruised purple of another incoming storm. He had no shelter supplies left. His heart sank. He couldn't build another igloo. Then he saw it. A dark slash at the base of a towering glacier wall. A cave. It might have been hope. Might have been hallucination. Didn't matter. He crawled harder. The last 100 meters were a waking nightmare. Nails splitting, gloves tearing, breath burning. His arm shook uncontrollably. His leg was a nerve fire. The world swam. But he reached it. He tumbled inside just as the storm slammed into the surface behind him. Wind howled at the entrance, furious and denied. The cave was cold, but silent. Safe. For now. He slumped against the wall, ripped open his last ration gel, swallowed the heat. Warmth spread through him. Then his multi-tool chirped. A faint rhythmic beep. Energy signature detected. Artificial. Repeating. What? He whispered. The signal came from deeper inside the glacier. His engineer brain, starved, half delirious, woke like a striking match. He dragged himself in. The first sign of the forge. The tunnel was too smooth, too perfect, not natural. Something had melted it with precision, leaving curved ceilings and glassy surfaces engineered to withstand pressure. The slope descended gently. Nolan followed the soft beeping of his multi-tool, dragging himself deeper into the glacier's heart. After nearly 100 meters, the tunnel widened into something enormous. Nolan stared. His breath caught. His mind stopped. The cavern was a cathedral of blue crystal ice, and within it was a ship, ancient, black, featureless, impossible, a long wedge of matte alloy, buried and preserved by millennia of ice. Its angles shifted subtly when he looked directly at them, a trick of alien geometry human eyes weren't built to process. Pressure damage had buckled a section of its hull. A jagged tear opened into its interior. The energy signal pulsed from within. Nolan laughed. A thin, hysterical sound. Of course. Why not? Why wouldn't there be an ancient alien spaceship under the ice? Perfectly normal. Totally fine. He dragged himself to the breach and hauled his body inside. The air was thin, frozen, metallic, breathable. A soft hum vibrated through the deck, barely perceptible but steady. Something deep inside was still alive. The multi-tool pointed down a wide, curving corridor. Nolan followed. He passed silent machinery. Strange consoles. Abandoned chambers. No bodies. No signs of life. Like the crew had simply evaporated. He reached a final pair of blast doors. One was bent open. He squeezed through and stared from a catwalk at a chamber, so huge it might have been a world unto itself. Robotic arms hung like metal titans. Conveyor belts snaked through the shadows. Fabricators the size of houses lined the walls. And beneath him, glowing faintly, a massive conduit plunged into the ice, tapping the planet's geothermal core. This wasn't just a ship. It was a mobile factory, an automated deep space forge. Nolan grinned despite the pain, despite the exhaustion. I think I'll call you. He whispered into the vast silence. The forge. Nolan descended from the catwalk into the belly of the vast chamber. Even half buried in ice, even half powered, the forge seemed alive, like an ancient creature breathing low under its own weight. His multi-tool pointed him toward a smaller room off the main assembly bay. The control room. The chamber was dim, lit only by a single amber glow emanating from an inset console. A dark table dominated the space, clearly meant for a holographic projection. On the wall, an alien terminal flickered with strange geometric symbols. Okay, Nolan whispered, sliding into the console seat. Show me what you are. He connected his multi-tool via a port that looked compatible in the same way that plugging a toaster into a fusion reactor looked possible. The forge accepted the input. Its screen cascaded with alien shapes, interlocking spirals, fractal lines, repeating glyphs. It wasn't language, not in a human sense. It was math, commands encoded as geometric relationships, equations meant to describe outcomes, not instructions. The logs were simple diagnostic entries, centuries old. Symbol A, symbol B, power amplitude, plus 0.01%. Symbol A, symbol C, temperature variance. Query, symbol B, symbol Q, unknown operation, aborted. A key, a dictionary in raw form. He felt a manic laugh rising in his throat. Okay, he muttered, rubbing his face. You want to speak geometry? Let's get weird. He huddled there for what felt like a full day. Reduced ration bar, trembling fingers, leg throbbing beneath its crude rifle splint, translating symbol after symbol, mapping each glyph to engineering shorthand. A equals command prefix, B equals amplitude, C equals query, Q equals structural derivative, delta equals termination, therefore equals relational modifier, and so on. He built a dictionary of 50 usable commands. Enough. Time for a test. He composed a command string on his multi-tool. Command prefix. Activate Unit 77B. Move x-axis plus 10. He sent it. The effect was dramatic. A crane the size of a small starship arm, nowhere near Unit 77B, jerked violently awake in the main bay. It swung like a beast ripping from hibernation, smashing its claw into a bulkhead with a deafening shriek of torn alloy. Then it went still. Nolan stared, wide-eyed. Okay, he whispered. Vocabulary, good. Grammar, atrocious. He had effectively said, dog hungry now, Wall. The ancient machine had tried its best. He needed a sandbox. Hours later, he found a non-critical system, an old holographic projector on the bridge. He loaded command strings into it. The room flickered with chaotic starfields, distorted shapes, swirling pseudo-objects. Then finally, something coherent, a wireframe cube, then a sphere, then a cylinder. He was learning. He wrote another command, describing an object purely through geometry and operators. Sent it. A three-dimensional schematic of a C9 rifle materialized in rotating light. The Forge understood him. Nolan laughed, delirious and triumphant. Hello, world. Now he could build. The design. He sketched on his multi-tool a crude prototype, a powered exoskeletal leg brace. Not elegant, not pretty, not coalition approved, but functional. Components. Primary strut running parallel to his tibia. Reinforced boot housing. Joint actuators at knee and ankle. Myomer bundles for movement. Integrated grab dampener. Cherum's disc. Suit interface port. He didn't need beauty. He needed to walk. He found a storage chamber full of alloy ingots. Dense, gray metal unlike anything in Coalition archives. Perfect. Dragging a single ingot to the fabricator took nearly an hour and nearly all his strength. His arms shook violently. His breath came in ragged bursts. But he did it. He fed the design. He uploaded his command string, a breathtakingly complex mathematical proof describing every angle, stress tolerance, power conduit, and joint articulation. Then he initiated the sequence. The Forge woke. Its deck hummed. Soft at first, then deepening into a resonant thrum. Lights flickered alive across the assembly bay. Robotic arms pivoted like awakening giants. Lasers sliced the metal into workable slabs. Manipulator arms molded, fused, sculpted. The entire ship groaned under the weight of reactivation. Layer by layer, the Forge built Nolan's design. He watched from the catwalk. Breath held. 8 hours passed. When the fabricator went silent, Nolan scrambled to the platform. There, lying the cradle, was a device of dark alien alloy. Angular. Heavier looking than any human tech. Power coiled beneath its frame in silent promise. His exoskeleton. The breaker and the bypass. He dragged the brace to the charging alcove. Found a port that matched his design. Plugged it in. Nothing. Diagnostics showed geothermal power flowing from the core, but not to the charging station. He traced the issue through the ship's guts until he found it. A junction box the size of a ground car. Its bus bars were melted, fused into black slag. Centuries of pressure and the crash impact had destroyed it. He had to bypass the main geothermal feed directly, which meant high-stakes electrical work on a conduit capable of vaporizing him instantly. Perfect. He sliced open insulation with his multi-tools cutter. Static crawled over his arms like invisible insects. He attached a salvage heavy cable between the main feed and the charging station, bolted the other end of the bus. He closed the circuit. The cable hummed ominously. The charging station glowed green. "Atta girl," Nolan whispered, patting the console. Now he waited 12 hours for a full charge. He ate the last of his rations, curled up in the control room, fell into a dreamless blackout. The first step, an alarm chirped. Power, full. Nolan spent the next hour attaching the exoskeleton over his makeshift rifle splint. He routed neural commands through his suit interface. "Okay," he whispered, bracing himself against the console. Moment of truth. He activated the brace. The mimers flexed. The servos engaged. The frame took his weight. He took a step. No pain. Another. Still no pain. Nolan laughed, sharp, ragged, victorious. He ran diagnostics. One error, dirty power from a geothermal tap, had scrambled his suit's neural interface calibration. He found a clean, isolated power source. The small maintenance terminal. He hot-wired the exoskeleton interface module to it. Ran calibration. Smoothed the command signal. 5 minutes later. Take 2. He activated the brace. It obeyed instantly. He took a step. A faster step. Then a full stride. Then a run. He stopped. Grinned. Activated the grav dampener. His weight dropped by half. Movement became effortless. Almost buoyant. He sprinted around the control room, boots skimming the deck. For the first time in days, he felt alive. He opened his map. Treekin's route wound cautiously around the northern spine. Nolan looked at the fortress-like mountain, looked at the exoskeleton, smiled. Shortcut. The avalanche. Task Force Kilo's progress slowed to a crawl. 6 days in, they were exhausted, running on fumes and despair. Chan's movements were slower. Cherum's feathers remained permanently flattened in distress. Alger's steps dragged, each one heavier than the last. Then the mountains betrayed them again. One moment, they trudged through a narrow pass. The next, a deafening crack, a roar like the world collapsing. Snow and rock thundered from the cliffs above. "Avalanche!" Cherum shrieked. They sprinted, diving behind an ice dome as a pass filled with a catastrophic wall of pulverized snow. When the world settled, their only route forward was buried under tons of debris. "We dig," Tracon said simply. For 24 brutal hours they excavated. Multi-tools overheated. Power cells drained. Their breath froze to their armor. The snow was packed like concrete. Boulders lodged like teeth. Eventually, they slumped, broken by exhaustion. Tracon stared at the block path. Even if Nolan had survived, even if he had crawled all this way, this avalanche had buried him absolutely. Whatever hope remained in Treekin's chest died quietly. He closed his eyes. Keep Cherum and Alger alive, he told himself. That is the only duty left. The summit. Nolan ascended the spine. Not walked, not climbed. Ascended. The exoskeleton dug metal claws into sheer ice faces. He scaled walls that would have taken his squad hours. Leapt over crevasses in single bounds. Skimmed over slopes like a skier at impossible speed. He reached the summit and saw the extraction plateau on the other side. Engaged the grav dampener. Launched himself down. He glided for kilometers and minutes. Wind howling past him, laughing like a madman. He hit the flat plateau running, sprinting across its icy expanse faster than any human unaided could dream. And then he saw them, 3 small silhouettes trudging toward the beacon. He grinned. Oh, this is going to be good. The wind on the extraction plateau cut like razors, dragging long white veils of ice across the flat expanse. Tracon, Alger, and Cherum trudged the final miserable kilometer toward the beacon's blinking light. They were barely more than moving shadows now, frozen, exhausted, hollowed by guilt and survival. Cherum checked her scanner. Beacon is active. Lander ETA, 30 minutes. Alger exhaled a rumbling sigh that steamed in the freezing air. "We made it," he said softly. "For him." Tracon nodded, though the gesture felt heavy, brittle. He had rehearsed Nolan's eulogy in his head. A soldier's words for a man he'd failed. He opened his mouth. The wind carried a voice instead. Casual, unhurried, infuriatingly familiar. "Man, I was about to send up a flare. Thought you three took the scenic route." They turned. 20 meters away, leaning against a blue ice boulder like he'd been waiting for a shuttle, stood Nolan Riley. Alive, breathing, eating from a steaming ration pack. His face was gaunt, his uniform torn, but he was unmistakably, impossibly alive. And his left leg was encased in an angular, dark metal exoskeleton, humming with alien power. Silence fell so absolute that even the wind seemed to pause. Cherum's feathers puffed out, her eyes wide, her voice cracking on every syllable. Tracon life signs confirmed. Human vital stable. Neural signature stable. It's really it. She sputtered, overwhelmed. "It's him." Alger's jaw dropped. Then he let out a bellow that shook frost off the ice dome behind him. A half laugh, half roar, half sob. Ugly emotions didn't fit neatly into fractions. He charged. "You son of a frozen grub." Nolan's eyes widened. Oh no, not a no-no. Too late. Alger scooped him up in a crushing hug, lifting him entirely off the ground. Nolan wheezed. "Okay, ow, okay." Friendly fire. Cherum darted in behind Alger, scanner already vibrating. Energy signature unstable. Myomer bundles alien. Gravisis output off the charts. Explain. Explain immediately. Explain everything. Nolan just shrugged while dangling in Alger's grip. Got bored. Build a leg. Cherum screeched. That is not a leg. That is a weaponized walking system." Then Tracon stepped forward. Every instinct told him this sight was a hallucination, an exhaustion-born cruelty. But Cherum's scanner was truth. Alger's hug was truth. Nolan's grin was truth. Slowly, Tracon reached out, placing a long forefinger hand on Nolan's shoulder. "You return whole," Tracon said quietly, a rare tremor in his voice. "It is good." Nolan met his gaze. "Tracon," he said softly, "you didn't leave me behind. You gave me a problem to solve." Tracon exhaled a long, shuddering breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding for 6 days. He stepped back. "Prepare for extraction," he said, voice steady once more. Above them, a dark grew in the sky, the lander approaching. The ascent, inside the lander, warmth felt like a miracle. Nolan slumped into a crash seat, steam rising from his body as the frost melted. A medic knelt beside him, checking vitals. "His leg is stabilized," she confirmed, eyes narrowing at the alien machinery fused over the splint. "And whatever this is, it's holding alignment perfectly." Cherum hovered nearby, feathers shifting in frantic patterns. "I require a full breakdown of fabrication patterns, alloy composition mapping, gravimetric distortion logs." Nolan held up a hand. "Cherum, I promise I'll tell you everything the moment I understand half of it myself." Alger was grinning, so hard it looked painful. "You crawled 60 kilometers with broken leg," he said. "And then you built that out of nothing." "Not nothing," Nolan corrected. "I had a factory the size of a battleship." Cherum nearly fainted. Tracon stood near the cockpit, silent, watching Nolan with a strange expression, relief, respect, and something like awe. "You defy doctrine," Tracon said at last. "But your results are outside all predictable parameters." "That's kind of my brand," Nolan replied. The lander broke through the upper atmosphere, Kryos shrinking below them into a white wound on the planet's surface. Alger clapped Nolan on the shoulder hard enough to jolt the seat. Cherum chirped softly, almost reverently. Chan, silent but watching, inclined his head, Critean acknowledgement of a warrior returning from death. Tracon stepped closer, placing a hand briefly on Nolan's brace leg. "You built your survival," Tracon said. "Not through strength, not through luck, through will." Nolan leaned back, closed his eyes finally. "What can I say?" he said. "Humans are good at not dying." As the lander locked onto the docking clamps of the orbiting battleship, Nolan opened one eye. "You know," he said to the squad, "after all this, you're buying the first round." Alger barked a laugh. Cherim chirped her agreement. Chan simply nodded. Trachon allowed himself one tiny, almost invisible smile. The hatch opened. Warm light spilled inside. Task Force Kilo, for Species 1 Unit, stood together again, against all doctrine, against all odds, against a planet that tried to kill them. They stepped forward as one. And somewhere far below, buried beneath 1,000 tons of ice, the forge hummed softly, awake now, waiting. If you enjoyed the story, we'd really appreciate it if you'd give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and share the video. Your support keeps these adventures alive and helps us bring you even more HFY stories from the edge of the galaxy.